Welcome to The Healthy Advisor, a podcast from WealthManagement.com focused on advisors' personal well-being and healing. I'm Diana Britton, managing editor of WealthManagement.com, and in this podcast we explore some of the struggles and personal development issues facing advisors and financial services professionals, and how to get to a place of healing for mind, body, and spirit. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Healthy Advisor podcast, and thanks for joining us. As you may know, this is the podcast focused on financial advisor health and well-being, and today's guest definitely counts on that score. Her name is Marissa Nehlsen. She's the founder and CEO of Freedom Financial Group, a hybrid advisor firm based in North Dakota. Marissa, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Marissa has a lot of accomplishments to speak of, not just running, a seven-figure financial firm, but she's also a coach, a speaker. She has her own podcast called Live Life Rich, and she's currently writing a book. And she's done all of this while struggling with Stargardt disease, which is a rare genetic disease that causes vision loss. She's lost her second husband, and most recently, she's raising her two young grandchildren. She's just been on quite the journey, and she's going to share a lot of that with us today. Her experiences have really shaped who she is today, and just her resiliency through life. Just really looking forward to hearing a little bit more about your story, Marissa. But let's go all the way. I want to kind of go all the way back to the beginning and talk about your childhood growing up. I know you grew up on a farm in frigid North Dakota, and then later on, moved to the trailer park. But what was it like growing up on the farm?
The farm memories are some of the best. That whole saying, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. That was my farm experience. I learned some of the greatest lessons about hard work and family and working together on that farm. I also learned a lot about how to manage pain, how to overcome some really very difficult times in our family as well.
Yeah, and so what happened on the farm? I know that you guys, I think you had to sell. It was just really tough financially. A lot of farmers were struggling back then.
Yeah, so this was the late 80s. So I'm aging myself here a little bit. The late 80s were really difficult all the way through the Midwest with droughts that had hit the farmers and ranchers in North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, that whole region all the way down. And our family was one of the casualties of that. I would call it the Great Depression in farming. And we ended up losing our farm in the late 80s. My dad did what he could to hold on to it. But it created a whole lot of other things, a lot of emotional issues, a lot of financial issues for our family. There were 8 kids in my family, and my mom and dad, we all worked really hard. I learned the value of a dollar by rock picking because we just didn't have any extra money at all. So instead of paying for farm hands, my parents, had kids, and the kids became farm hands, and we learned how to work really hard on that farm, doing things like rock picking, shoveling grain, running grain trucks, kind of all the things that you do when you live on a farm, which led to really what was my dad's breakdown. And we had a large family, but this was my mom's second marriage. Her first husband died when my older sister was 6 months old. His name was James. Coincidentally, I'll tell a little bit later about that in the story. But he died of cancer when the baby was 6 months old. She then later married my dad. I was the first one of the second batch. My mom refers to us like cookies. and then I wonder why I got a hip problem, baby. I'm like, what is going on here, Mom? Anyway, I said, couldn't you refer to us like broccoli or something, Mom? But we're like cookie batches. And so first batch versus second batch. And I was the head of the second batch. And my dad, when he was struggling going through all these financial issues, this was a generational legacy farm, the 100-year, century-old farm. And when he took it over, it was already struggling. Then the
Mm.
drought hit. They just couldn't make it. My dad really just lost it during that time, became very abusive, began to beat my mother and my brothers and sisters. And there's a lot of things that happened there. There were great things, which I learned about life and business and growth, but there were also some of the most challenging times of my life that led me to be able to overcome things later on in life.
Yeah, and I know he abused you one time when you were 8, you were telling me.
Yeah.
What happened?
I had forgotten to put the towels in the dryer, and my
Mm,
dad was supposed to go to a funeral that day. He was coincidentally the deacon in a Baptist church. So
mm,
just tells you never really know what happens behind closed doors. Uh,
gosh, yeah.
so my dad came in and I realized my mistake. Uh, and I tried to run. Like I tried to hide. You got to get out of the way of the storm when that happens. We had been taught, run and hide if dad goes into those crazy spurs. But he caught me in the laundry room, threw me up against the side of the wall and just began to kick me with these big steel-toed boots.
Oh
And
gosh.
I remember hearing this voice in my head, and I know it sounds crazy, but I remember hearing this voice just saying, "Get up. You've got to get up right now. You've got to get up." And I did, and I got up, and you know, I'm I'm barely able to stand. If you get kicked by a 6'3" man in steel-toed boots and you're 8 years old, it doesn't end well for your body, right?
Yeah,
And
sure.
so I got up and I pointed my finger in his face. I looked straight up at him and I said, "You better just kill me. Because if you don't kill me, I'm going to tell everybody what you're doing here. I'm going to tell everyone who you are." And
Wow.
his eyes got really big, and no one in our family ever stood up to him. They just didn't. Uh, because quite frankly, he was scary. He used to have this leather belt that had this metal weaving that ran through it, and he'd take off that belt and he beat everyone with it, and it was ugly. And so I looked into his face and I said, "You better kill me, because if you don't kill me, I'm telling everybody." And in that moment, like something broke, something just switched, and his eyes got all big, and he backed up and he walked out of the room. And
Mm,
after that, he never again touched me, never again hit me, to the extent that, he'd be beating my mother, and I would step in between the two of them, and
mm.
he would stop and he would leave the room. So I
Wow.
just really believe, like, and I'm a person of faith, so I just tell people, just take a deep breath. I'm not here to convert you, but I'm just telling my story. But I really believe a hedge of protection was put around me that day, and it has guided me my whole life in really hard, dark days.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know you very well, Marissa, but just from what I've uh, heard from you, it seems like that moment was something that really shaped who you are and the way you reacted to struggles and hard times throughout the rest of your life. To be able to stand up to them like that, and it's incredible. Um, and so I know, unfortunately, family lost the farm, and your mother left your father, or he left. Tell us what happened. I know you guys moved to the trailer park.
Yeah, we middle of the night, my dad had beaten my mother,
Mm,
went to sleep, and my mom got us all up in the middle of the night, and we all packed, literally backpacks, and we left, and we didn't go back. And
mm,
we were on the run for a bit through shelters and places like that. And then eventually, my mom was able to find a trailer in a trailer court in Minot, North Dakota, this little tiny town in central North Dakota, and moved into this trailer house, two-bedroom trailer house, all of us kids. But we didn't have any money, like nothing. And part of that is you got to pay for heat in the winter. It's pretty rough. So my mom
yeah.
moved us into the trailer court. And I think another moment that just was a game changer moment was my mom. I was 14 then by the time she had left, 14 years old. And we were watching one of those old Save the Children like infomercials that happened right before 1 o'clock. All the TVs used to go off back in the day. We didn't have 24-hour TV. And I looked at this screen and I was like, man, mom, we're poor, but we're not just a little bit poor. We're like really poor. Now, to get the picture of what we were dealing with, we had to nail blankets to the walls and quilts to the walls and to the windows and to the doors because there was literally no heat and it gets 20, 30, 40 below zero in the winter there.
Yeah.
So my mom
Wow.
had an old I had an old kerosene heater that she put up in the living room, and then we all had a campfire. And if you're not a person of faith, I will tell you, I have learned faith just from the stuff I've survived, and I'm not dead from. And that being one of them, we literally should all be dead just by the fumes. But we survived that, and I looked at my mom that night. She was laying on an old brown couch we had fished out of a dumpster. And I said, Mom, we're not just poor, we're like really poor because the people on TV, they have food and we don't have any food. And she
Mm,
said, Yeah, Marissa, we are poor, but you have a choice to make. You can be a victim or you can be victorious. What will you choose? And
mm,
man, Diana, she said it one time, like one time in my life, and it just stuck. And so that was another turning point in my life of the tape that plays in my head every time there's a challenge is, will you be a victim or will you be victorious? What will you choose? And knowing that you have a choice, I think is huge in any circumstances and conditions.
mm. Wow. Well, I know, I guess I'm curious how those experiences, um, shaped who you are today, your outlook on life, and also like how you got into financial services.
Yeah. So that happened a little while later. A few years later, my aunt was in the insurance industry, and when you grow up in the trailer courts with no dad, you start looking for love in all the wrong places. And
Mm,
I got pregnant at 17, had my first baby at 18, and I was living two doors down from my mother in that trailer court. And I
mm,
remember looking at my baby girl and I made her a promise. I said, listen, you're not going to live this way. You're not going to live this life. I'm going to do something different here. I don't know what. I don't know what, but I'm going to do something different. And my aunt approached me and said, hey, I need help making appointments when I come to North Dakota, when I come to Minot. And I have all these orphan policy holders, these insurance policy holders. She was a manager for an insurance company. She said, can you set appointments with these people? Because I have to go visit them. And
mm,
so she gave me this box, like literally one of those old recipe card boxes. This was, 35 years ago, Diana.
yeah.
And she said, I'll give you $5 for every call you set and you make. Every call, every one that gets set into my schedule. I said, you're going to give me $5. Now, keep in mind, I cannot buy diapers or formula at this point. I am going through the trailer court, picking up and through the ditches near my house, picking up, recyclable trash, pop cans, bottles, things like that, so I can get enough money to buy diapers. And she said, "Yeah, just $5. Like that's great." Now, $5 was like you could have just as well written me a check for $1 million. So I got on the phone and I learned the script and began to set appointments for Donna's schedule, and that led me. I'd set 12 appointments in a day for her. Literally,
Mm,
she would say, "You got to stop because I need to
mm,
go to the bathroom. I need to eat. I need to take a lunch. Like stop it." And I got really really good at it to the point where she said, "Hey, would you be interested in selling insurance?" And I had no idea what this woman made. I just literally did like a script. I said,
yeah.
sure, I'll do this. Yeah. So that shaped me with the insurance side. She gave me I call it my first big break. I was
Mm,
19, got all my licenses. But then when I got licensed, the insurance company that she worked with wouldn't hire me because their minimum required age was 21.
mm,
So then I went through the phone book, which um, I got at the uh, local library, and I went through and started looking up all of the insurance companies that were licensed in the state of North Dakota. And I just went down all the way to A. And by the time I got to the D's, somebody said, "Yeah, we'll hire you. We don't care what age you are."
mm,
Great. So I started with this little crappy fraternal company, which I won't tell you what that name is because I had a manager there that came out and said, "Yeah, I'll help you, sweetheart." And he puts his hand on my knee and he says, I'll help you. I'll help you go along. And now
Mm,
I'm looking at my baby and I'm broke. And I'm like, what am I going to do here? Because this is the first one I've got. And I called all the way from A to D.
mm,
Uh, and I said, okay, victim victorious, right? And so I
mm,
got up from the table, took my stuff, and I said, you know what, I'm going to get so good at selling insurance. One day I'm going to tell this story about, this nasty old man
mm-hmm.
who was hitting on me to help me along. And I say that in quotation marks.
Yeah.
But I'm going to get really good at this. And one day I might just buy the company you're working for and fire your ass. So, so that's how that went. That's how that went
Yeah.
down. I don't know if I could actually say that on your podcast. You might need to edit that out, but that is literally exactly what happened. And then I got really good at selling insurance to the point where this same company that my aunt worked for said, "Hey, we'll make an exception. Uh, Come on board with us." And because my sales records were so good. So that started me in financial services. And then I went from there, started looking around and asking the question, what else do people need besides insurance?
Mm,
And got it securities licensed, went through all those processes, started building out what else do they need. So we started building out relationships for tax planning, legal planning, wealth management, financial planning, so that we hit all of the components for our clients. I think it's by asking the right questions. What do people need? What do they
mm.
want? How can I best serve them? And uh, that's really how that all started.
Yeah, that's a great story. And so I know later on you were diagnosed with Stargardt disease. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right,
Yep, you are.
but it's a rare genetic eye disease that happens when fatty material builds up on the macula, the small part of the retina needed for sharp central vision. And it's there's no treatment for it, but vision rehabilitation can help people make the most of their remaining vision. So when did you first find out that you had it when you were first diagnosed, and how did you react?
I was 29 years old. My brother, a few years prior to that, I was just about to turn 30. My brother, a few years prior to that, had been diagnosed with Stargardt, and he went totally blind from loss of all central vision. When I say totally blind, not dark, he has peripheral vision,
Mm,
but he went in 18 months. So he went from being a 20/20 visual person to, like a 2600 in just a
wow.
very, very short period of time. And he was in college, this is my baby brother. And I remember watching this, just being like terrified for him, going, my God, how's this kid ever going to make it? He's so screwed, right?
Mm,
And I'm just telling it like it is.
yeah.
It was awful to watch what he went through. You can't drive, you can't. How do you support yourself financially? And he just said, I'm going to make it through. So he, had this happen a few years before, so I knew what this looked like. Well, then I started getting these like floaters right in my eyes, and
Hmm.
and I went to the doctor, and they said, "Man, we're just so sorry to tell you, the worlds have collided, yada yada yada. You got the same thing your brother's got."
Mm,
So I went to multiple people for a second opinion. I said, "Is there no cure? Is there nothing? Is there anything anywhere in the world?" I literally went all over the world looking for a cure, and short of a miracle, there's no cure. So they said the good news is you got about, 10 to 15 years, because it's not till women go roughly in their 40s. Could be
mm,
early 40s, could be mid 40s. If you're really one of the lucky ones, you might even make it all the way to 50 with keeping a good percentage of your sight. So at that point there, I was like 20/50, 20/60, which is pretty decent sight. And when you're 20/80, you typically can no longer drive. When you're 2200, that's when you're legally blind in the United States. Uh, Today, I am 2500 in one eye and 2600 in the other. So I have almost no central vision. If you see me, I always make the joke, you better wave big, baby, because I can't see nothing small. And so wave big. But I would actually tell you that this is probably one of the best things that ever happened to me and my
Mm,
business. And the reason I say that is when all this happened, I was a one-man shop. I had built like a agency type process out where I had a bunch of independent contractors and I was making overrides on their business. And and at that point there, I literally asked myself, like, who the heck's going to hire a blind financial planner? You're in trouble here. And I had
mm,
myself and an assistant. And what are you going to do? So um, I started reading everything I could on teams, building teams. John C. Maxwell, who is a great leadership author in the marketplace today, he had several books out there. One of those was, Becoming a Person of Influence. The other one was 17 Qualities of a Team Player. And I literally got those things and studied them like a Bible to my business and said, okay, what do I need to do here? And
mm,
began to build the team because I knew if I wanted not only for my income to continue, my clients to be served, my world to not come, crashing down here, I needed to do that. So, the first week, I'm not gonna lie, the first week I ate a lot of ice cream and I cried
mm,
intermittently, and I would look at my children and I would just literally sit there and stare at them for hours.
mm.
No, they'd go to sleep. I'd sit in their rooms and stare at them for hours because I was like, I don't ever want to forget your face.
Yeah.
I
Mm.
know you've got children, Diana, so you get this. But when you're faced with not seeing the people you love ever again, there's a mental
It's a
game you got to
scary.
play. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was and it was mind over matter at that point. And I had to make a decision to make up my mind. What are you going to do next here? And that whole piece from my mom came back again. You can be a victim or you be victorious. I remember calling my brother and he said, Marissa, people don't follow you because of your eyesight. They follow you because of your vision.
Mm.
They follow
Wow.
you because of who you are and who you help them become. And so you have a decision to make. Who are you going to be? And and what are you going to have for a vision for your life? This is not about eyesight. This is about vision. And he said, blind doesn't mean dead. And I was like, whoa.
Mm,
So my little brother, he's, totally my hero. He works for Microsoft today. They send him all over the world. He's a blind man, literally teaching people how to use their technology. He's uh, advocate in the world of disabilities for people. We don't call it disabilities. We call it all abilities. Where we come
mm.
from, it's all abilities. Everyone gets to come and play with the giftings that you have, and we do a workaround, right? We just figure out how do you work around that. So anyway, he's amazing and massive advocate in that world of technology.
Yeah, he sounds incredible. So I know in 2013 you divorced your first husband, and then a few years later you met James, your second husband.
Yeah.
What happened to James?
Yeah, so quick correction on there. James was my fiance. We did not make it
Okay.
to the altar. We were supposed to be married in February. Actually, we're going to get married Valentine's Day in February of 16.
Mm,
But I met James. I was just really coming off of an ugly, ugly, awful, pretty solid bad divorce,
hmm.
where, if anything could go wrong, it did. And um, I was really bitter. I was just mad at everyone. And so I threw myself into work and I just pounded it out. I had some of the best career years of my life during that time, just, bounding it out. Because I was throwing everything into it because my personal life just was in tatters. And I'm looking at my kids and, financially I was doing really well. I bought my own house, took care of things, had great employees and great team members. Uh, and I meet this guy and I said,
Mm,
I'm not ever gonna do that again. Like I'm never opening my heart up to somebody who's just gonna leave me. And um, he said, I'm gonna love you forever. So he was an ex-Army Ranger, had just an incredible story himself. He was left in a sandbox when he was 5 years old by his drug addict mother. Him and his brother, they were adopted into a family where They were not treated well. He joined the army at 17, became a decorated ranger, spent several tours in Iraq, just an incredible guy. But when I met him, he was out of the army and he was three sheets to the wind in a bottle. And
Mm.
I met him in a crappy old country bar. My sister said to me one day, "Hey, you know what? You're sad, lonely, and you're an idiot. Get up, get out of bed. We're gonna go dancing." And I'm like, "No, Melly, I'm not going dancing." Melly said, "Well, I'm going dancing, and you can be the DD." I said, "Okay, great. You go dancing. I'll be the DD and make sure you make it home. All right, big sister prerogative, right?"
Yeah.
So we get into this old country bar, and this guy asked me to dance, and I said no. He came back three times. By the third time, my sister saw it. She literally pushed me out on the dance floor, and I said, "Listen, man, I can't dance. I don't do country bars. This is not my scene." And so we're rolling around the floor and stepping all over his feet. And he looks at me. He's 6'3", built like a brick house, looks at me with these sparkly blue eyes and says, "You know what? You really can't dance." And I'm like, "Listen, I don't need this crap, dude. Like, I'm leaving." And um, but there's something about him. And so that started something with him. So fast forward 2 years. We're dating. He lives in his house. I live at my house. He calls me on a Saturday morning. He says, "Babe, I can't walk." Now, keep in mind, just a few weeks beforehand, this man had picked up a couch, like the entire couch in my living room,
Mm.
by himself and
Wow.
moved these furnitures around in my living room. So he's a big, strong guy. He's laying on the floor when I get there, and he says, I can't feel anything from anywhere from the chest down." And I said, "My God, what's going on?" So I strap this guy onto my back. We head to the ER. We get into the ER. They take all these, as they do, take all these tests. And a few hours later, they come in and everyone's just kind of white. Now we are in the ER, and they said, "Listen, we have a real problem here. We are so sorry to tell you that, James, you are full of cancer."
Mm.
And flashbacks of all the stories that my mom used to tell me about her husband when he had
Mm.
cancer,
Hmm.
whose name was also James. Just this panic sets in. And I said, "Well, what do we do? Like, what do we do?" And they said, "Well, we have to airlift you to a facility in Minneapolis because there's no way we can care for you here." And he's got an 8-inch tumor on his neck, back, and spine, but it's not just there, it's everywhere. He has literally tumors everywhere, and he's lighting up the screen like a Christmas tree.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, and so we get airlifted the next morning. Keep in mind, by the way, the power of what you do as a financial person in the marketplace today. In the middle of the night, I had my stuff, James had his. Uh, James never had like a financial person. He's just one of those good old boys who saved and did his thing and put money into his 401(k). Never had a will, healthcare
Mm.
directive, durable power of attorney, any of that stuff. So in the middle of the night, I'm calling my team, my attorney on my team, two of the ladies who could do the signing authorities for us. And they're literally building out a plan for him in the middle of the night for his will, his healthcare directive, his durable power of attorney. And he can't take any pain medication until that stuff's signed, right?
Wow.
And he has no legal documents. Now we're getting on a plane the next morning, and James had three small children of his own. He had divorced. Now, this was a second relationship for him as well. Um, and the panic that sets in when you realize your family's not planned for, when your people aren't planned for, you have real power in the financial services industry to really make a difference in the world. Now, if you're not an attorney listening to this, I know you don't make any money doing that. But at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do. And people need us. They need us to show up and think about the things that they don't want to think about and prepare them for the things that they hope to God never happen. So I'm a real advocate for, if you're in the financial services world, man, think about this holistically for your people, because at the end of the day, you may just be the one that stood in the gap that made it better
Mm.
for that family. So anyway, that's a side note, but we get the documents signed, we get on the airlifted to Minneapolis, we get there and we start chemo and radiation. And the only time I saw this guy cry in the entire time I was with him was the day that he woke up from his surgery and he had gone blind. in the surgery. He was on his stomach too long. And they came in and they said, listen, we don't think your eyesight's going to be restored. And he took my hand and he just began to sob. And he said, babe, I made a promise to you with this whole eyesight thing you got happening. I was going to drive you around for the rest of my life. I was going to just be your chauffeur, or if we got really, really, really rich, we would get a chauffeur and we'd just make out in the back seat. That was his big fun joke. And I said, it's okay. He said, nah, appears I'm going to have to break my promise to you.
Mm.
And I just remember thinking about the promises we make to the people we love. And, this is a time where in my business, I've told this story many, many, many times since then, because I want to make sure that people have proper planning in place. I want to make sure that they have a team that's actually doing that, that the right hand's speaking to the left hand, because I know what's at stake when it's not. So he fought really, really hard. A little before Christmas, he came home and we brought him home to North Dakota, converted my house into a hospital, and I became his full-time caretaker. So I did kind of everything, from bathing him to helping him use the bathroom to clean up on aisle 5 with the bed, medication patches, you name it. He had a feeding tube, learned how to do a feeding tube and handle his port and all the medical stuff. But at that time, we couldn't afford, the $50 an hour round the clock care. So between myself and one of our dear friends, that she would come in and help us for, 6, 7 hours a day. We became his caretakers. And
Mm.
Christmas Day that year, so 3 months later, roughly, um, I'm and again, this is just my story, so I tell people just take a pill. This is what happened. But I was, praying over him, and I was like, God, just heal this man. Like, I love him. I just, when you get desperate, you'll call, you'll do anything you can in the world to
Yeah.
save people you love. I would have written any check, given all that I had. Um, but there's some things that you can't change that outcome. And I remember praying for him, and he lifted my face in his hand and he said, baby, you keep praying for a miracle, but I already got my miracle the day that I found you.
Oh.
I have a faith. I have a family who loves me for the first time ever. Uh, and I know where I'm going. So you need to make me a promise. And of course, I'd have promised him anything, right?
Mm.
I said, okay, well, what do I need to promise? He said, I need you to promise me that you're not going to spend 5 years in a bottle. You're going to get up every single day and live, really, really live. You're going to live the life you were meant to have, and you're going to never waste a day. And I promised him I would never waste a day.
Mm.
A few weeks later, he passed away in my arms, and we said goodbye for now.
Mm. I'm so sorry for your loss, Marissa.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you.
I know, so, I know a few years ago you were faced with another struggle, and your son and his girlfriend had some drug problems, and your son ended up in jail, and you fought for custody of your 2-year-old granddaughter and your 1-year-old grandson, and that was like a whole nother struggle in itself. And I mean, if we had more time, I'd love to go into more about that, but just I know you're still in that, you're raising those beautiful children. um how have you kind of gotten through all of these struggles in your life to find healing?
I think for me, and again, I'm not being preachy, but I think you gotta dig deep in your faith, and
Mm.
you have to believe that there's a better day on the other side of this. And for me, I'm a person of faith, so I call on that daily and often. Um, I remember the rocks, and the rocks are all the things that you stand on that you went through in the past. If I can make it through this, I can make it through this. If I made it through that, I can make it through this. So I think you got to ask yourself, what have you survived up until now? What things would have destroyed others up until now? And who will you become out of this? I also just have a healthy or maybe a very unhealthy sense of hell no, I'm not going to quit. So
Yeah.
I think a little bit of that farm girl grit it
Hmm.
has always been in me to just say, um, I'm going to find a way no matter what. I have a list of no matter what's and never agains in my life that never again, run back to what broke you. Uh, no matter what, never quit. Keep going, keep moving forward. There's always a way if I'm committed. So I believe really strongly that help shows up many times just when you need it, when you're willing to ask and get other people on your team and in your posse to help you make it through. So I'm really incredibly grateful. I have the most extraordinary people around me who have been the most amazing friends, prayer warriors, dinner makers, just people
Mm.
that in my bad seasons have said, we're going to help you. And we believe in your mission to serve others and make the world better. So we're going to help you.
I love that farm girl grit. I love that. And I really admire just the resiliency and the strength that you've had throughout your life. I mean, it's really an incredible story. And I found just from this podcast, talking to some of the most successful people in this business are those that have had, um, you know, very deep hardships, and gotten through those things. But I'm afraid we're just about out of time.
Mm.
But I'd like to thank my guest, Marissa Nehlsen, for being on the podcast and sharing her story with me. Marissa, thank you so much.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I know it's not easy bringing up a lot of this, painful memories and painful stuff. So we really appreciate that. If you'd like to reach out to Marissa, you can do so on her by going to her website, marissanehlsen.com, and that's spelled MarissaNehlsen.com. Or you can email her at info@marissanehlsen.com. And if you have a struggle yourself and you wish to share your experiences and help others in similar situations, please feel free to reach out to me at diana.britton@informa.com. I'd like to thank you for listening to The Healthy Advisor. If you've not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This is Diana Britton reminding you that where there's healing, there is hope. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to The Healthy Advisor, a podcast focused on advisors' personal well-being and healing. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of WealthManagement.com. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional advice. Always seek the advice of your healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your particular situation.